So Michel, thank you so much for joining us on Euronews. You've made a lot of headlines this week, and it seems to me, when I put together everything that you've said, there's a deep concern on your part about the future of the European Union, but also, in a way, the functioning of the institutions at this stage. Why?
First, good morning. And indeed, I think that the European Union is a priority, and we have to be better in delivering for our citizens. And we know what we have to do. We have to deepen the single market. We have to innovate more. We have to invest more in our common strategic priorities. But indeed, I think also that we have to ask ourselves if the regulation, the way we regulate is accurate. That's not. I'm observing that the precautionary principle, which was a good principle in the past, is becoming more and more a zero-risk principle. And the result is that we innovate less than outside of Europe. That's a concern, that's a problem, and I think that we can do better.
When you say you worry about the future of the European Union and you talk about decision making too, the reason why things are not moving fast enough, is it because there's no vision or because the leadership is simply not up to speed? And I'm referring to the entire spectrum.
Yeah, I don't want to blame anyone in particular, but I'm observing in recent years that in many parts of the world there is a vision and there is the ability to make decisions and to implement the decisions that are made. Let me give you an example. The Draghi report is on the table for a long time ago, and today, as we speak, only 10% is implemented. It's impossible for me to understand such a situation in those circumstances.
When you say that's impossible for me to understand, the externalities and those who know you would say, that's a difficult statement to understand because you know perfectly how the machine works. If a report is not implemented, it's because it stumbled a lot of obstacles. What are those obstacles? Because I seem to recall certainly the Commission, certainly the capital saying this will be our compass and it will guide our action. Is it because there's too much volatility in the world? Or again, is it because there's a vision the leadership simply cannot implement, does not know how to implement?
If I'm honest with you, I think there's a big gap between the words and the decisions made and the implementation of decisions. Everything should start with initiatives put on the table by the European Commission. That's point one. Point two, we know that within the EU, unity is never taken for granted. You need to fight, to make decisions and to make things happen. And I have the impression that we do not dedicate the energy that is needed to put in place the capital market union.
What do you mean by that? We're not putting the energy in place that's needed.
I have the impression that sometimes there is the temptation to make a lot of speeches, to make a lot of comments, but I'm not certain that is enough, and I'm even certain that it's not enough. What is needed is to work with the member states, with the European Parliament, to make decisions, and it's difficult for sure. It's obvious. It's easier to walk around the world, to make comments and to make speeches. It's more difficult, but more important in those particular circumstances to deliver for the benefit for the Europeans. First, the single market, the deepening of the single market should be a top priority. And it will not happen as a miracle. It is that you have to work for it. Point one. Point two, European security and defense. We are talking about it for many years, but what are the concrete deliverables? What are the concrete results? And point three, we need to engage with the rest of the world. We need to develop reliable partnerships. And today, I regret that I'm observing that some of my colleagues within, or my former colleagues within the EU, they made a choice to appease the United States, sometimes to appease Israel, and with the rest of the world to show a certain level of arrogance. And I think we are losing our credibility by acting that way.
But when you say some prefer to make speeches, you also say appeasing the US and Israel. Many would think of that as a straight dig at the head of the European Commission.
That's your conclusion.
So that's your conclusion. So you don't want to get into names. Well, you say that's my conclusion. You don't want to get into names. But what you're saying is, in any way, your comments are coming from any background of animosity is based on your observation over the past 2 years that what was promised simply has not been delivered, or certainly not our case.
My observation is the following. I think we should not be taken by surprise. I was one of those Many years ago, I was not alone, but we were not alone at that time, making the point that we needed to get prepared. We needed to accelerate what was useful to be stronger from an economic point of view or from a security point of view. At that time, I remember that those who were drawing the attention that the United States is a country with a new orientation, and it's more than Donald Trump, in my opinion, we were accused to be protectionists. We were accused to take distance from our traditional allies. Today, we can see that the list of differences between Europe and the United States is getting longer and longer every day. And despite this situation, I'm observing that it seems difficult for some of my former colleagues to draw the lessons and to make the decisions that are needed for a more sovereign and less dependent Europe.
So you mean that it's difficult to talk in abstract without names, but you mean there's a temptation or a drive to still cling on to the US?
Look, I'm observing that when, under Joe Biden, when the United States made the decision related to the Inflation Reduction Act, it was probably a way to protect the American interest against China, but there was a huge collateral effect within the EU. It's impossible for me to understand why at that time, despite my efforts together with some other colleagues, it was not possible to speak out, to be firm, and to use the tools that we have in our hands. That's an example. Another example, when the United States launched tariffs against the rest of the
Triple
world,
the tariffs in the EU.
including against Europe. And when I observed that there is an impression that some seems to be happy because it was at the end not so much this aggression. Yes, it is a lot. And yes, for every private companies, small or big, I meet today, I can see what is the impact. It's another example. When I'm observing that with regards to Ukraine and Russia, there are more than ambiguities between the current administration in the White House and Ukraine. What does it mean for us? It means that we have to accelerate the implementation of the measures, and we know what we have to do. More investment, more innovation. Let's act faster. Let's stop by having always the obsession to regulate things that do not yet exist, which is
because there's too much regulation still. Because the message from the Commission is one of simplification. They would say we're simplifying and so fast.
Ask the private companies what they think about that message. Let me give you an example. This Commission,
because they will defend it. They would say they are doing it.
In this European Commission, when they started, the top priority was the Green Deal, and they started to develop a very heavy regulation in that field. And a few months before the European elections, the decision was made to dismantle some parts of those regulations. The impact is a lack of predictability for the companies, for the businesses. And today, the Draghi report, I repeat again, only 10% implemented. That's not a big success.
What you're describing to me is a form of erratic leadership. And I wonder, where are the capitals and the EU leaders themselves? Because that's also their job. The job of the Council also is to counterbalance trends, tendencies in Brussels. Is there no checks and balances at this stage on the power coming especially from the Commission? Is that the issue?
Look, I want to focus on the substance, on the price for the future, and my point is all of us, we know what we have to do, but I'm observing that it seems that's difficult to make the decisions that are urgent and that are needed. I trust the European Council. I think that by nature, the European Council is the right body to decide what are the main orientations and also to make the most difficult decisions, because the European Council is the guardian of the European unity, and this European unity is something that's not easy to achieve. It requires a lot of work, a lot of preparation, it requires a lot of collective intelligence, it requires to listen to each other, and I'm confident that sooner or later the European Council will make additional decisions to clarify some of the orientations we have to decide on in the near future.
Are we to understand, therefore, that the Council's stance it should be stronger. It should have a louder voice. It's not as strong as it should be, its message now.
You know, it's in my opinion, it's not a question of voice, it's a question of decisions that have to be made. And what is a bit frustrating for all those like me who are absolutely convinced that this project is more needed than ever, the European project, the European dream, the European principles, the European values, the European coexistence. What is frustrating is the fact that all of us, we know what we have to do. We know exactly what we have to do. Everything is on the table. And I'm observing that there are always good reasons to procrastinate. There are always good reasons to waste time, and that's regrettable. And again, I don't want to blame anyone in particular. Let's be clear. That's not my point. When I want to blame someone, I'm very clear. You know me. Here, that's not my point. My point is, let's look at the future. And we have tools, we have capacities, we have capabilities, we have great companies, we have great searchers, we have a lot of strength within the EU. And there is a crisis, there is chaos across the world. And by experience, we know when it's difficult in the world, in general, the EU is able to learn lessons fast. Let's act faster and let's learn our lessons.
Some would argue the weakness at times of the Council goes back to the idea of unanimity, and that has been dragging the action and certainly the pace and the speed around it. Viktor Orbán obviously has been crushed in a defeat. Viktor Orbán now is gone from the Council. Is that going to make things better? Or actually, would you argue the dynamics are more profound? Even with the Hungarian Prime Minister gone, this issue will remain.
Look, I hope that it will help the European Council to be more united in the future. But
are you relieved that Viktor Orbán lost?
I wouldn't say that, because I will tell you why. Because I think that based on the experience I have on some topics, some in the European Council were hiding behind Viktor Orbán, point one. And point two, in some of the European countries, you can have tomorrow some national leaders who are not so far from Viktor Orbán's ideology on some topics, including on Ukraine, for instance, point one. Point two, does it mean that unanimity is a problem? For sure, unanimity is a challenge, there is no doubt. But I think we should think carefully before making the decision to not to use unanimity anymore, because if you stop to try to involve every country in the same decision, the risk is that you will weaken the weight of the EU at the international level. And that's why I think that the priority should be different. In my opinion, we should fight against the abuse of this veto right. Because if you follow the philosophy and the principle for the Lisbon Treaty, the idea was really that the veto right was supposed to be used when your vital interests are at risk. And the problem is that today, too many countries are tempted too many times to use this veto right as a kind of tool to blackmail and to get something in another fight. That's the problem, number one, I think.
And I'm going to ask you two final questions. Now you say this idea of unanimity, finding ways around it, perhaps is not the silver bullet. And yet, what we understand is the Commission now certainly believes a two-speed Europe may be a solution. Is that something that you look at objectively and go, yeah, it's a bad idea, or it sounds easier said than done?
No, first, it is already existing with the Eurozone and with
so say it's not new.
That's not new. That's not new. And indeed, I feel that we have to accept it on some topics. If it's not possible to the 27 countries in the board, maybe some of them, they need a bit more time. We have to accept it. But it should not make it impossible for the others, if there is political will, to advance and to make progress. That's my first comment. And point two, the enlargement process is a very important strategic decision. And because of the enlargement process, I have the opinion, indeed, that the concept of variable geometry could be a good concept to be pragmatic, to be effective, and to make possible for those candidate countries to join the EU as faster as possible, but maybe not immediately with every tool in terms of participating in the decision-making process.
And just finally, you had indicated at the time of the European Council that you saw 2030 as a possible date for enlargement to take place. At the time, that was seen as almost pie in the sky. It was a dream, a proposal that had come out of nowhere. When I listened to the words of the Ukrainian president, he would probably agree 2030 is a good date, but also probably too late. So when does Ukraine join the European Union?
You know, my point is very clear. I hope as soon as possible. And these are our common interests, point one. And point two is not only about Ukraine and Moldova. It's also about the Western Balkans. And it's very important that we accelerate this process, this path. We made promises many years ago. And unfortunately, on both sides, the candidate countries, the EU, we didn't deliver on our promises. Now, we can see what are the circumstances. Do we feel that we are more secure with the Western Balkans outside of the EU? I don't think so. I feel that we are more secure. The future will be more stable, more predictable, more prosperous with the Western Balkans within the EU. And of course, it's a technical process, but it's also a political decision. Do we want to find every week a new justification to postpone, or on the contrary, we want to be effective and we want them to join the EU as soon as possible?
It seems to me, however, listening to the leaders just finally on this point, that they would agree enlargement needs to happen as soon as possible and complete the union, but they would also say we need to reform and there is no fast track for Ukraine. Are those three statements compatible?
Yeah, but what you are mentioning is agreed language, no fast track, etc. When we want to do something, but in parallel, we add a sentence so that it is in fact more difficult to get the result. Let's be clear. There is no doubt that in those countries they have to do their homework and they know what they have to do. They have to put in place the reform, they have to guarantee the independence of justice, to fight against corruption, etc. Point one. On the other hand, let's be honest, in some of the European countries, it was very comfortable to use the argument of those countries not acting as fast as needed, because there is in some European countries a difficult political debate with this enlargement policy. And I think in those circumstances, we could all win if we tell the truth to our people. Everywhere in Europe, the future will be more stable, more secure with them within the EU. And of course, there's some efforts, but there's also our efforts that are needed in terms of domestic reforms and in terms of what kind of policy we put in place.
So Michel, thank you so much for joining us here in Euronews. I appreciate it.